happened. I don't know what that was about. All right. So good evening. This is Hasper TV, and this is Harry. And I'm back again finally with a live stream after maybe like 2 weeks. So today I've got Carl with me. Carl, how you doing?
Yeah, how you doing, mate? You okay? Nice to be back and talking about something positive in a win for once, isn't it?
Yeah, we're actually talking about a win for once.
A
In like
win and a
decades.
decent performance, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, Spurs actually scored first in the game, which is quite interesting. So, but I was just looking back, going into the game. What were your feelings before the game? Because I have to admit, people would label me as like negative about this, but I expected us to lose 3-0 because of the way we've been playing the past 10 games, 9 games. What did you think going into it? Were you positive about it? Were you mixed? Were you?
No, I have to say, I'm not sure anyone, if you're a true Spurs supporter, have been following the club a long while. I don't know many that were feeling confident actually going into this game, especially, away at Selhurst Park. If it had been Palace at home, it would have been a completely different feeling. You'd be very confident. But we just don't normally have a good record there the last few seasons, and we don't normally turn up and play well. And, they've managed to get one over on us. And I think with the way that we were playing and the side that you knew we were going to put out, I think most of us went into that game thinking, oh, could this be another poor performance and a defeat on the cards, So I don't know anyone who went into it with, brave enough to be able to say, yeah, we're going to turn up tonight and put a performance in. I think, even if you thought we might win, you'd probably been sitting there saying this won't be a pretty watch. This will be a behind the sofa, covering your eyes for most of the evening watch. And thankfully, in the end, it turned out that it was a good win. But again, the Spurs, it wasn't easy, was it? Because most of the first half, you would have said we were second best and lucky not to go in behind.
Also, looking to the game, there was one change in defence, notable change. Eric Dyer came back. Were you happy about that? Were you sad about that? I, for one, wasn't very happy, but yeah, elaborate on what you thought.
Yeah, do you know what? I wasn't surprised because I think Conte basically pulled him out the firing line, didn't he? After that mistake at Brentford, and obviously a lot of criticism went Dyer's way, quite rightly, because the mistakes he's been making. That one at Brentford, it was almost kind of Sunday league sort of football, and a mistake you'd expect to see on a Sunday pitch. So I think he pulled him out just to give him a break, maybe a mental break, maybe as well to show people that, well, when I stick someone like Tanganga in and he doesn't perform, you might think, well, actually get Dyer back in the side. So I wasn't surprised to see him go back in to the defence, because I think, Conte was just giving him that one game rest and maybe making a point to people to say, well, look, this is still hard to say this, but probably one of the better defenders we got, which, when you consider
what my next question is going to be.
If he's one of the better ones, then you're kind of bang in trouble, aren't you?
Yeah. So, yes, in view of Dyer, there's rumours that he might sign a new contract. Do you think he will sign one? And because we had this argument, I think, or debate on Twitter about this, actually, I think I remember. Do you think he will sign? Do you want him to sign? And is it actually a good move for us? Because I have my reservations personally, but yeah.
So I think ultimately the way you have to look at this is, do we want Dyer to sign a new contract? I think most Spurs fans, most Spurs fans think the contract signals that he's staying and he's going to be a part of the team. And obviously most of us would sit there and go, well, hang on, the guy clearly isn't at the level we need if you want to challenge for titles. But ultimately what we have to realise is he's going to sign a new contract and the club are going to give him a new contract, because ultimately they're protecting the asset. Because whether we like it or not, Dyer is probably maybe a £15 million player. If you want to sell him, in the market, English centre back, someone would probably pay around 15 million for him. So the club are not just going to suddenly let him run his contract down and leave on a free. So the club are just going to protect the asset and give him a contract so that if they do want to sell him, they can sell him and pick up the fee. And ultimately we have to accept that's how it is. It could also be if you bring in better centre halves, then Dyer could be a reasonable squad player, you know, that you might be able to bring in and cover a couple of positions. You know, he could, like when he first came to the club, cover a defensive midfielder position here and there, cover in as a centre half. So ultimately, we don't want him, you know, we'd like to improve on him and bring someone better in, and obviously not have to rely on him week in, week out. But we have to accept that the club are going to cover themselves and protect the asset that they've got and not let that walk away for free. So that's what his contract is. You know, I don't think there's too much to get upset about. Hopefully it's just we're giving him a contract so we can sell him. It doesn't mean we see this guy as the future of our defensive partnership, because I don't believe that is the case. I don't think if Conte stays, I don't think he sees him. He's someone I think Conte would look at and say, I need to improve on him going forward, but he could be useful to have in and around the squad.
See, I kind of disagree with you. I think Dyer's time's up, even as a squad player. I know people, and I don't know if you know Haas from not just him. There's a few other YouTubers spoken about this, saying, "Oh, we should put Dyer in midfield." But I think with the options we have, he wouldn't get into our midfield even as a backup.
Oh no, no.
So he can't play right back, even a back four. I know he played a bit there under Poch. He can't play as a wing back. Forget that option. So unfortunately for us, because he plays as a central centre back, for Spurs fans to think he signed a new contract is always going to make us feel that we're not going to sign someone else, if that makes sense.
But I don't think that's something you do have to worry about. You do have to think of it as from a business point of view. If you've got an asset sitting there that potentially is 10 to 15 million pounds worth, and an asset that you've pumped money into, you might still be sitting there thinking, listen, mate, your time is done here. We need an upgrade because you're not good enough. But I'm not going to let you walk away for free from this club, because ultimately someone will still buy you. You're an current England international. You know, managers seem to rate him. You know, you have to remember when you watched the Spurs documentary, Mourinho thought he was fantastic. You know, you saw that training clip where he's like, look at Dyer, you know, he's such an intelligent, brilliant player. Conte has obviously come in, used him. We might find that whether we rate him or not, Conte thinks, no, I like him. But in general, the club have to protect that asset, and I don't think his contract means that he'll be starting next season, hopefully. But they're not. They just don't want him to walk for nothing when his time comes.
The reason I mention this is because all the reports I read about our transfer targets are mainly either left centre halves, because I assume this is to do with Longlay's loan. It's going to end. A right wing back, which thank God Emerson's on his way out apparently. So yeah, at least we've got he's on his way out finally. And then like there's no real talk of like a central centre back.
Yeah.
From the reports I read from journalists, I guess we're talking about something like Fabrizio Romano and Lyle Thomas. I'm basing it off those. But don't you think it's worrying that there isn't any reports like that? I'm just going off of what you said before, because like for me that's worrying.
Do you know what? The one I have to admit, I'm not someone that gets caught up in a lot of the transfer rumors that go on. You know, some people get really triggered by like a Twitter transfer rumor, and I'm not someone that does, because ultimately I think even some of those journalists, some of them haven't got a clue, or the people that think they're in the know haven't got a clue what's going on in the background or who's being looked at, what deals are possibly in the pipeline. They're just sticking a headline out there. You know, they may have heard a small whisper or something and they think, right, let's just stick this out there, because they know fans jump on transfer rumors and everything like that. It could be that we might not see Dyer replaced in January, but I would be pretty confident that come the summer, I think Conte will want to change up that whole back line, aside from Romero. And I'm talking about goalkeeper as well. I would imagine if you're Conte right now, and he should be talking to the board saying, right, listen, I need two good centre halves. I need a new goalkeeper because this one's starting to throw the ball in the net every other week now. And as we've known, I need two wing backs that can add quality to this side. So I don't think it will happen in January. We might see one centre half, which, like as you say, will be someone that rotates around maybe Dyer and Lenglet. And then in the summer, I think that's where you'll see. Well, I'm hoping, and we should be
It's like, oh,
bring in more than one centre half and getting rid of 2 or 3 of the ones that we've got at the moment, because we've got an abundance of centre halves who are just not good enough. Rodon, Dyer, Tanganga, Sanchez, all of those you could get rid of in a heartbeat.
Also, it brings you on to sort of January, because we've not really been linked to buying a centre half, and we've been linked with signing an attacking player. I think it's quite. I don't know if I agree with it so much now. And a right wing back, which I think is, for me, is pretty much essential, because at least, we'll touch on Gill or Simon White in a bit. Yeah, Gill was my man of the match, by the way. But yeah, so for me, I was saying, sorry, it's worrying that there's no centre half link. I'm not expecting to sign 2 centre halves in January. I think that's a massive ask. And also, the right wing back obviously is important, but surely an attacker is like on the. Not, I'm saying it's not essential. I think it's really far down the list of players we should be aiming for.
Yeah,
hey, you're right. Luke, I was getting to contact you about next week. His AFC.
I'd have to agree with you, mate. I mean, like as you say, well, as we saw the other day, didn't we? These rumours about the Marcus Edward connection, where you would sit there and say that is the last sort of player we need to be going after right now with the state of the squad, because ultimately all our issues are defensive issues and potentially a midfield issue. So I don't see the point of
catch up.
being linked with any wingers or anything like that at the moment. You wouldn't mind, at some point again, you wouldn't mind seeing a natural forward come in where you could give Kane a rest, or maybe suddenly put 2 natural forwards up top. But right now, when you're looking at a difficult transfer window to do business in, you just need to go and strengthen the areas that need strengthening immediately, and they are defensively in Spurs's situation. So any attackers, I would say, listen, I'm not fussed on attackers. I think we've got enough players in those positions that can see us through to the summer, with quality as well. That's what I say. With Kulu, Kane and Son, not many teams can say that they've got that sort of talent on the pitch. So, certainly don't need to go and spend on any attacking players right now.
It's good you mentioned Edwards, because I kind of want to touch on this. One of my brother's best mates actually sent me a message about this. He's really furious that we're trying to sign Edwards back. It's not why it's really expected actually from a Spurs fan, but for me, it stinks of like a club signing. Marcus Edwards I just don't imagine Conte, after watching him for one game. I know he destroyed us with Sporting Lisbon, but I just don't think he's a Conte sort of player, Marcus Edwards. I'm not saying he wouldn't improve our squad, but it just doesn't seem the Conte player, because I think Conte in general likes physical players. Like Kulusevski at least is tall, he's strong, and he likes, obviously they have to have pace and skill, of course, but he seems to like the very physical players like Richarlison, for example, as well. Someone like Edwards doesn't seem to fit that remit. And I think that's what worries me as well. It's like, if we went and wasted money on Edwards, would he even get a game?
I mean, the worry with Marcus Edwards, isn't it, is that I think people only see him in fits and starts, in potential like highlights, or like the odd game here and there. Like I say, the games against us, where you sit there and go, yes, okay, he had an okay game. There was only really in that game in Lisbon the one run that kind of blew you away, where Dyer had sold himself. So I think the issue with someone like Marcus Edwards is you'd bring him in, and I just think he'd be like more a 2.0. There'd be moments where he'd have great moments and he'd do things that you go, oh, that was brilliant. But then he'll have a run of 4 or 5 games where you go, well, the guy hasn't delivered nothing in 4 or 5 games now, so is he as good as everyone thought he was? And ultimately, to me, I just think again he would be one of the he would be a great Spurs player because we love to buy a purple patch player, don't we? You know, a bloke who only does it once every 3 or 4 games, and Marcus Edwards I think fits into there. You know, I haven't seen. In truth, though, I don't think many of us have probably seen enough of him since he left the club on a weekly
Yeah.
basis to be able to judge what does he deliver week to week and is it good enough, you know.
I kind of want to carry on what you said there because for me, I find a lot of Spurs fans, and I'm going to go on to Pedro Porro in a minute because unless I'm talking about him in the chat, but we'll watch a player play against us. He'll play really well, especially if it's an ex-player. This is like even more pushed out, and then everyone just on Twitter goes on and is like, "We should sign him back," or "This player's immediately like the answer to all of our problems because he played against us and he was good." It's like, and he's a player we were linked with or a player we used to have. And I feel
We'd have
like people
signed
get caught in
about
the
900.
furore of it all. I don't know if that's the right
Yeah.
word, but yeah.
I mean, we'd have signed about 900
Yeah,
goalkeepers if
at this
you
point.
judged them on the way they play against us, wouldn't we? Because, you know, every
Timbrel,
goalkeeper seems to have a
Timbrel.
worldie when they play against us. So, you know, it's you do have to be very careful, you know, like as you say, even with Pedro Porro, you know, you have to sit there and say, have we seen enough of him for us to really believe that he would be the answer to all our problems? But I think that's the modern football fan, isn't it? People get very reactionary when they see. I mean, I know you've said we're going to talk about Gil at
Yeah,
some
in a
point,
minute.
and
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, today I've seen stuff of like, oh, you know, this is the future. You know, this is Jenny. You know, people putting pictures of him and Johan Cruyff
What?
together, and I just go like, the guy had half a decent game. You know, the first half it was like a matchstick blowing in the wind
Yeah, that's a
out
good way
on the
to
wing,
describe it, actually.
you know, like getting knocked
Yeah.
down with a gust of wind going near him. And then the second half, credit to him, he had a decent half, you know, but at the same time, he played a couple of decent balls. Well, shock horror, I'd expect a professional footballer to be able to pass a ball to someone else, you know, during a game of football, given that's what they train at all week long. You know, I would expect that. I think it's people react very knee jerk to people that do something very average, but suddenly we blow it up to be, oh wow, this is the next best thing. You know, like I say, I'm not going to knock him. His second half was a massive improvement, but I don't see Gil having a future at the club. If I'm honest.
You know who Gil reminds me of, and this is a bit weird. I'm not saying as a player, but do you remember we signed Iago Falque all those years
Yeah,
ago on the AVB?
yeah,
And I
yeah,
actually, for the short spells I watched of him, I actually really liked him. I actually thought there was a player there.
yeah,
Now he was obviously a club signing. There's no two ways about that. And he ended up being sold for like a profit, let's say.
yeah.
But like with Gil, obviously I don't know if he was signed under Nuno. Was Nuno there at the time when he signed or not?
I think he might have been. Yeah, he came in the summer, I think, didn't he? So
Yeah,
that would
yeah.
have been Nuno. He would have been, yeah, because he played in one of the early Europa Conference League games, I believe.
So like I actually like Brian Gill. I think he's a good player. I think there's a player in there. But there's 2 or 3 factors you need to take into consideration with him succeeding at Tottenham. Number one is obviously game time. How much is he going to play? Considering we have Kulusevski down that side.
Yeah,
Number 2 for me is the formation because I see Gill as a number 10 playing in the pockets. I
yeah,
think that's where he'd be most useful. As in sort of like, you know, we had Modric when
yeah,
Redknapp, in Redknapp's first game, Modric played as a number 10 behind, I think, Pavlyuchenko or something like that. I can't remember
yeah,
exactly, or Bent, something like that. And he played him as like, gave him like the freedom to play in those pockets. And I think, I'm not saying Gil's the level of Modric, but I think you'd have to do something like that for Gil to get regular game time and also to get good, I guess,
yeah,
at
yeah,
Tottenham. And we can't really afford that patience. And at the other end of it, I think if you're going to loan him out and you see him having a future at Tottenham, you need to loan to a Premier League club where he's going to get played every week or most weeks.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
maybe like
I
a
mean,
Leeds or something. I don't know. That's something I
I
think.
think it's like as you say. I mean, you know, if it wasn't for Kulu and Richarlison's injuries, then Gil isn't getting anywhere near the starting 11. You know, and that's the honest truth. And also for me, if Kulu and Richarlison are not injured, my opinion is Gill goes out on loan in this January transfer window. I don't think he will now with those injuries, because I think Conte will feel he probably needs him around to be able to play him. But if they weren't injured, he would probably have gone on another loan this season.
Yeah.
And then ultimately for me, in the summer, you'd probably find that we would have sold him back to a club in Spain where it might just suit his game out there. But, you know, he's not going to, like you say, under Conte, he's not going to get any game time as a number 10 because we don't play that formation. Hence the reason why I can't see us going out and getting a player like Maddison at any point, anytime soon. And ultimately, he's not going to replace Kulu. Richarlison would always be ahead of him in Conte's mind for me. So, yes, I'm like you. You see glimpses of him where you go, oh, there
I
does
actually re-rate him.
look a player in there.
Yeah,
but I just don't think he'll find his future at Spurs, to be honest, unfortunately.
It sounds strange me saying this, but I think under a manager like Harry Redknapp or someone like that, he probably would become like a really good player, because I think someone like him would probably try and build a team around like Gill and Kulu in like the same team somehow, or something like crazy like that.
Yeah, and
Like
an
a
attacking manager
4-4-1-1 or something, or 4-2-3-1 as a 10 playing closer. Or the only solution I found in my head was that if you play Gill as a number 10 behind like Richarlison and Kane, and you tell Gill you have like a freedom to play in the pockets.
Yeah.
And Kane and Richarlison essentially play higher up. But you'd have to rely on our wing backs, who are not very good at the moment, to play very wide, and also to supply all the crosses in a sense, because Kulusevski comes off the right and delivers balls, and he'd be playing, say, if Kulu played as a number 10 or Gill, they'd be sort of spraying balls through balls more than, say, going wide and coming inside.
Yeah.
Crosses that way. You'd have to rely on the wing backs to provide literally all the width. And I don't think we have the wing backs capable of doing that.
And like I say, we just don't have the manager that, in my opinion, would be prepared to take the risk and ultimately change his complete tactical system to fit that player in.
That's Scrooge. yeah, I like that. Actually. But yeah, so I really like Gill, but I'm with you. I think in the summer he'll probably get sold.
Yeah, I do.
For now,
I think so.
till the end of the season, if he can do a job and get a few assists here and there, maybe get a couple goals, I'll take that.
And, definitely.
I mean, last night in the second half, like you said,
yeah, it was a much better second half from him. And the balls were great to Kane and that for the goal. So you never know. Hopefully that might be a confidence booster. I'm sure he'll definitely play this weekend against Portsmouth. So that might be again where we see a little bit more from him, and he might be able to build on it. But ultimately, you sit there and think once Kulu's back, he'll be straight on the subs bench again.
The only reason I say it, like with Gill, I don't like him off the right, but if we're talking a like-for-like replacement that we have with Kulusevski, he's probably the closest we have. Rather than sticking Richarlison on the right, I'd rather see Gill on the right, because at least he has some sort of creative. Because I think, unfortunately, people tend to misconstrue what Kulusevski and Richarlison do. Richarlison, for me, is almost like a striker or a second striker. He's not a creative player. I know he got the assist against Forest, but he's not exactly like a Modric type or Kulusevski type or Eriksen type player. You're not going to get a creative outlet from him.
Yeah.
But with Gill, at least he's sort of, because he's played as a 10 before, he's a creator. Kulusevski's obviously played as a 10 before. He's sort of a creator. He's more of like, if you're going to play this sort of formation with a creator on the right, Gill's probably the best backup we have.
Yeah, I mean, Richarlison's never been any good on the right, and ultimately the reason that is because those players like to cut in and use their stronger foot. So,
oh wow, I don't agree with that personally. Yeah, but yeah, so like also going on to Skip. So personally, I don't think he played well at all yesterday. What did you think of his performance? And following on from that, do you think Sarr deserves some game time against Pompey?
I think we Skip. I think we have to remember that was his first game back in 6 months. So obviously, it's when you're coming into a side as well that are not exactly like playing flowing football and dominating teams and dominating the ball. it's hard to get yourself back up to speed. And, you know, when you're being overrun as well by 3 central midfielders, it's a tough night. I think, unfortunately, Skip again is another one of those players that I always just feel there's a little bit more hype around him than what he actually gives. And it might be that he kind of found his level when he was in the Championship with Norwich. And I don't mean that horribly to him. You know, he probably could be a good player in a lower half of the Premiership side. Again, a player that I just don't think will have a massive future at the club. You know, he might be kept around as a squad player and someone that you can bring in. But again, do you look at him as a player that is going to push you to another level? You know, would he get into Man City's side? Would he get into Liverpool's team? Would he get into Man United's team at the moment? And ultimately you sit there and say, no, he wouldn't, you know. So again, it's part of the problem we have, isn't it? You know, we just have too many players that you sit there and go, would they get into any of these top 4 or 5 teams in the league? And you go, no, they wouldn't, you know, because they don't do enough. And they kind of, again, you know, certain people big them up as though there's these generational talents. And ultimately you just go, actually, they're average footballers, you know, they're just average footballers who can do some nice things, but they also can do some bang average, poor things. And I think Skip falls into that. But I felt, you know, last night was harsh on him coming in first game in 6 months, being overrun in that midfield area. And ultimately got dragged after, because it did look like he was blowing out of his arse by the start of the second half. So, you know, yeah, I wasn't surprised to see him come off. But the guy who came on for him, again, you know, not going to go mad. You know, I've seen
Twitter
people
was going mental about Sarr.
I mean, I've seen people put pictures of Sarr and Yaya Toure together. Like, what are you people on? Like, wow. You know, yes, he came on, he was neat and tidy and he did some good things. And, you know, I was a bit like, well, this is an encouraging start because,
Hey, Dan, you're right, mate.
he's got around. He always was looking for the ball, which was really good. You know, and everything he did was neat and tidy. But we need to see more than 20 minutes to be able to judge a player of that young.
You know what it always reminds me of? I know this is talking back in the day. Twitter didn't exist back then, by the way. When, you know, we had Tarabat.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, when he came on against, oh gosh, who was it? Derby? I think it was Derby. And he comes on and he does all these skills, like starts taking on all these players. It was, I mean, Tarabat was really lazy. But whenever people go crazy on Twitter about like a performance for like 20 minutes, it always reminds of when Tarap's like first game.
We've had so many over the years, haven't we? You know, Jose Dominguez, you know, do you remember when he come on and was skinning people left, right? I think that was Derby as well. His first game was against Derby at White Hart Lane. And he was skinning people left, right and centre. And all the crowd are all olaying after like 20 minutes with every time he got the ball. And ultimately it was just like, he's had, you know, that was probably the game of his life and it never got any better after that.
Like with Sarr also, he's quite a young player coming from a different country. He's taken how long to finally get some minutes? To draw conclusions from like a 20-minute cameo is so just crazy. I think to me
it's madness, utter madness.
I saw people with
Twitter,
comments on YouTube channels and tweets saying we want to see a Sarr and Bentancur midfield. I'm like, what the hell, man? Like, you just played 20 minutes.
But then there are people out there, Harry, that still, you know, Ndombele the baller. And you sit there and go, really?
It's funny you mention him, because I saw tweets of people saying we should bring him back because our options are that limited.
Dear me. Have people not seen enough? Do we really need a second serving?
I don't want
you know, I think people said that one pirouette in the middle of the park, you know, over 90 minutes doesn't make someone a baller to me, you know.
But it's even like Sarr. I know he played some minutes against them. Who was it on the weekend? Because we had such limited options. Who did we draw to or lose to? Villa. That's a Villa. Villa. We lost to Villa. So he came on in that game, and I saw tweets saying, "Oh, I want to see more Sarr. Sarr's really good." But when I watched the game, I was there. I didn't really think he did much of anything really that match. I just think people are very, because Skip obviously is not exactly where he should be at. let's say at this time,
Yeah.
at this point in time, as soon as someone comes on and does something slightly different, or does a pirouette, like you say, or something, they're like, "Oh, we should play him ahead of Skip. He's done more in 5 minutes than
Yeah.
Skip's done
I
in
mean,
5
we
years."
all understand it, don't we? You know, we
Yeah.
all want these young players to come in and do really well. No one would love it more if Sarr came in and was the next Yaya Toure, or Gil was the
Who
next
gladly
David
has one.
Silva. But, you know, ultimately you have to tone it down and go, what have we actually seen? We've seen 20 minutes of a guy making mostly 5-yard sideways passes. And again, like as I say, I would expect most professional footballers to be able to do that on a regular basis. You know, we need to see it. Yes, we need to see it longer term. And yeah, you know, no one wants it more than any of us that this guy could develop and become one of the best midfielders in the Premier League. But I think people just need to taper it down a little bit and go, right, that's not, because also you don't help the kid, because if all of a sudden Sarr is getting this build up that, you know, now, we've got the next Yaya Toure on our hands, you can't live up to that pressure, you know. So we just need to say, just let this kid bed in. Let's see a little bit more of him. Let's see him in a game against a better side, because again, last night, good win, but Palace crumbled after that first goal, and we'll have a lot tougher tests in teams we come up against.
Another reason why I bring up Terrat is because in that derby game, I think we were 4 or 5-0 up.
Yeah.
And also in this game, we were 4-0 up against Palace before Sarr came on. So I don't think you can really say how good a player is when he comes on and you're just seeing out a game with like a 3-0 win or 4-0 win.
And you have to accept the other team have already given up. You know, the other
exactly.
team are now just, right, we're in damage limitation, and, you know, ultimately we go again next week. But like I say, no one wants this kid to be the next Yaya Toure more than us. But we haven't seen that yet after 20 minutes.
But so I'm going to touch on 2 more players before we go into Pompey. Harry Kane, what do you think of his performance last night? Sky gave him man of the match.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, for me, what more can you say about Harry Kane? You know, the saddest bit is there are still Spurs fans out there that actually put disrespect on his name at times. And ultimately, you just go, listen, we've been privileged enough that we've watched one of the best strikers in the world for as many years as we have. And ultimately, you sit there and say, you know, when people say, oh, but he hasn't delivered in big games, you know, ultimately, when you look back, you'll find he has delivered in many big games. And you'd sit there and say, where would we be as a club if we hadn't had him and his goals? You know, where would we be? Because there's many a season where he's carried us through, you know, not only with his goals, but with his assists, you know. So he is just, for me, he's the best striker in the world. I don't put, and that is perfectly correct. Isn't it amazing that when you give the guy some decent service, what he can do? You know, I sit there and say, if you put Harry Kane in Man City's team this season, he would have had as many goals as Haaland would have had, and he'd beat Shearer's record within the next few years, you know. So the bloke is world class. We're lucky to have him, and we just have to hope that he sees enough to potentially stick around a little bit longer. You know, the one scary thing is that he'll beat Greaves' record in the next couple of weeks. So that will make him the club's highest ever goal scorer. And we just need to hope he isn't sitting there thinking, well, I'll hang around to beat that record. And then once I beat that record, I'll look to move on somewhere else and start looking at winning titles and maybe chasing Shearer's record down.
Because, I would say, obviously. Well, let's touch on Son. So, apart from the first half and Tilly scored his goal, let's just say Tilly scored his goal. He was holding on to the ball too long. He was making really bad decisions, choosing passes, dribbling, just everything seemed off. And then he got the deflected goal. It was a deflection. Did you see any hope that we might see the Son of last season in that game after the goal?
Obviously, a goal always helps, doesn't it? You know, whether it goes in off your arse, as long as you get to claim the goal, it's a confidence boost. So we have to hope that does kind of work. But then we were all hoping after the Leicester hat-trick that was it and his season
I was
up
going
and
to say
running.
that. Yeah.
He's been horrendous recently, Son. You know, he's all-round general game has been horrendous. You know, his touch, his passing. You know, he also struggles to beat a man as often as he used to. For me right now, I feel teams have worked Son out and Spurs out, which is, listen, Son's only dangerous if you play a ridiculously high line and you allow Harry Kane to stick balls over the top or through you for Son to go running onto one-on-one with his pace. If you don't let Son do that and you say to him, just stand him up, make him try to take you on, then I don't think he's anywhere near as effective as when he's being put through one-on-one with a goalkeeper. And I think teams have worked that out with us where they just say, look, if you play a high line against Spurs, you'll get killed because Kane will thread Son through and Son will be able to beat you in a race and finish. If we don't do that, you kind of nullify a massive threat. And, you know, you do take away most of what Son is dangerous at. You know, there's still a good player in there, but we've not seen it at all this season, I would say, apart from one half against Leicester.
I was going to say the same thing. After his hat-trick against Leicester, everyone thought, Son's back. Blah, blah. And then we didn't see anything for ages till the Frankfurt game, I think, when he scored 2 goals that game, I think. Yeah. And then again, we didn't see anything for ages, and then he scores last night. Like, for me, with Son, I kind of agree with you because I'm still of the belief that Mourinho brought the best out of Kane and Son as a duo.
Yeah.
Because we played so deep, and then we just hit him on the counter in 2-3 passes, and then Son or Kane would score a goal. That's literally what it was. And I think last night, because Palace obviously had to chase the game, there was more openings, and on the break, obviously we scored a couple goals. But I think the difference to me between Kane and Son this season is I think Kane's seeing a lot less of the ball compared to Son, at least from what I've seen, and a lot less chances than he did say last year or even the year before that. But Kane's still scoring every chance he gets. Not every chance, but most of the chances he gets. With Son, people forget this, but he was 1-on-1 last night with the keeper, and he hit it straight at him. He could have hit it over him. He could have hit it left. He could have hit it right. And
that was unusual, though, wasn't it? Because, you know, the one thing that Son was strong at was
that
when he is put through, you normally thought, right, he'll finish this. But you rightly said earlier, where you suddenly started seeing him look more dangerous last night was once Palace knew they had to commit forward to try and get back in the game. And suddenly, when they suddenly were having to step the line up a little bit higher to try and take more risks, then there was a few more chances where Kane could have played him through, or, you know, he got chances to run onto the defence. But before that, at 0-0, Palace weren't allowing none of that. They're like, no, we're not going to play that high line and get suckered in to what Tottenham want to do. And that's where, when that's happening right now, Son isn't bringing enough to the party that he should be doing, given that, you know, outside of Kane, he is the next player you look at to be creative and cause teams problems.
I think also with Son, it's more the fact that he hasn't really worked on his game within possession, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like you mentioned, he gets nullified because I find nowadays he'll have the ball, he'll come inside or on the outside, and then three defenders are around him, and he doesn't know what to do. He will just run into them and will just lose the ball.
Head down. Hopefully, if I just keep running, they'll move out of my way. But they don't. You know, they just stand their ground and nick the ball off you. Yeah, and he doesn't have a drop of the shoulder, a turn or twist or change it. You know, he can change direction, but he doesn't seem to when he needs to. Like I say, I just worry with Son because, as I say, unless you got teams that are prepared to commit suicide, I don't see it working. You know, it might still work in European games because I think more European sides will be prepared to play that high line and take a risk. Whereas most weeks in the Premier League, if you're coming up against sides, say the lesser sides, who have come in thinking we need to just play deeper, then they're not going to do that anymore because they know, well, that's how Spurs want to beat you. You know, get the ball to Kane, he'll put it through to Son, they're in and they score on the counter. So teams have become wise to it.
Yeah, it's just like you look at someone like Kulusevski. He's really good with the ball. And
Very
in
deceptive.
possession, he makes a huge difference. Of
Yeah.
course, I mean, he's got all these assists and goals. But even on the break with Kulusevski, I still think he's dangerous. I think with Son, it's different. It's mostly like, I hate to use this word, but he's sort of one-dimensional in that sense because,
Yeah.
like I said, in possession, I don't see him doing much of anything.
He's a pace threat, whereas
Yeah.
Kulusevski is actually on the ball threat because he can drop the shoulder, turn, catch a defender off guard 1 minute. I think I'm going that way now. I've gone that way. And Kulusevski has got this really great knack of making it look like he's lost the ball.
Yeah, yeah.
And just when the defender thinks, oh, I can get that, he's
Yeah.
past you. He gets one little nick on it and he's away. So he's very deceptive, Kulusevski, and he's very clever on the ball. And that's something that, like I say,
He needs to do that. He needs to do that more.
Unfortunately, you've got to play to Son's strengths, and we haven't been able to do that this season. If you had a Maddison or Ericsson, like as the guy said there, in midfield, who could play those balls without Kane having to drop all the way back, then that would also help.
But I think with Son also, until Mourinho came in, he wasn't really noticed as much, I think, by like the media. I think when Mourinho made him into like this star player, let's say, because he was obviously good on Pochettino, but I don't think we ever saw Son hit this like heights until we played a very counter-attacking sort of style.
I think Son for me fits into the typical Spurs player, goes through purple patches. He'll have 2 or 3 weeks where he'll score a goal each week, but then he can also have many games where you could sit there and say, was Son actually even playing today? Because I never really saw much from him. And one thing that I've always not liked, sometimes Son does, is when the ball goes out wide to him, he instantly passes it back to the wing back, where you say, no, turn, and now I want you to be creative and go forward. Whereas he can sometimes very easily give possession off to the wing back, and you think, well, no, I wanted to see you take the ball on there. That's where you've got to take control of the game. So we just got to hope that goal last night maybe gives him that bit of confidence. Portsmouth this weekend, I can't see many changes in that team. I think he'll play in that one, and you can rack up a couple of goals in that game again as well, ready for the North London derby.
I think Kane, almost 100% he'll get arrested. I'll be very surprised if Kane plays that game because
I don't. I think Kane will start 100%.
Because if he gets a booking, he misses the derby, I think.
Yeah, but Kane's a goal machine, and he wants goals, and he'll be sitting there eyeing up Greaves's record in that FA Cup tie. That's for sure.
I don't know. I think Kane won't play, but I think the whole defense / midfield will change a bit because he'll want to rest some players. Unfortunately, I think we'll see Emerson and probably Sessegnon.
That's a game that you should be able to, isn't it? Let's face it. If there's a game that you think you should be able to change players up for, then it's this game that we've got at the weekend. Because if you can't change a Premier League side round coming up against a team like Portsmouth, then you have got real issues.
But are you expecting us to beat Portsmouth?
Yeah. I mean, we'll beat them. I don't think things are that bad just yet. And that's no disrespect to Portsmouth, but I think we will just be too strong for that. Don't get me wrong. Again, it won't be a 6-7-8-0 job where you brush them aside. It might be a 2-0. It won't be a thrill a minute game. I'm sure, as we remember last year's FA Cup, the first game that was looking a bit dicey. That's how we play, isn't it? We're not the most exciting team to watch, but I think we'll get the job done there again in that one.
Okay, so just before I touch on the Levy out LENIC out chants last night, because I don't know if you heard them or heard about them. With Pompey, do you want us to throw everything at the FA Cup? Do you think Spurs should be prioritising Saturday's game?
Got to, haven't you? We're not winning the league. We're out the Europa League. Realistically, we could get past Milan, but realistically, are we winning the Champions League with the quality of teams that are in that? You wouldn't have thought so. So Yeah, we beggars can't be choosers, can they? It was a bit like the
Yeah.
season we were in the Europa Conference League and people
Mm.
turning their nose up at it. You sit there and say, who are Spurs, what position are Spurs in to turn their nose up at any sort of competition? If you're not going to, if we're not going to win certain things like the title race or Champions League, then you've got to go for the next best thing you can win, and that's the FA Cup. So for me, yeah, we need to take it seriously. I'm all for resting players against Portsmouth because I think we can do it. But we've had previous seasons where FA Cup semi-finals and we've played players like Vaughan and it's cost
I
us.
remember.
So
Yeah.
we need to take it seriously and we need to try and win it, because what else is there to win? So yeah, we've got to go for it. We can't turn our nose up at competitions. If we was in a title race right now, 1 point behind, and looking like a team that could win the Champions League, you'd sit there and go, yes, I'm happy for you to prioritise, and if you feel this is one you need to get rid of, then so be it. But we're not in that position, so we can't do that.
Because Spurs have a habit, because we'll touch on leaving ENIC in a minute, where we'll just get knocked out of all the cups and try and concentrate just to finish fourth.
Yeah,
none of the other cups matter apparently. So
it's what we used to slate Arsenal for,
yeah,
wasn't it? At one point, it's like
this
top four isn't a trophy.
I don't say top four is like a big thing, because we used to slate Arsenal for years and years about it.
Don't get me wrong, it is a big thing. It is something you need to get to help you progress as a club. But not being funny, I'm always against this adage of, well, top four or a trophy. Well, why not both? Why can't we go for both? We're a club that are in a position where we should be able to do multiple things, not just one or the other. So yeah, you've got to take it seriously.
Okay, so now touch on the Levy out in the couch chance. So unfortunately or fortunately, I had the TV on mute because I was watching on the watch along, so not allowed the crowd noise. Now, did you hear any chance of the Levy out any count stuff at all on your TV?
You did hear it. It did sound like it was being slightly muted when it was happening. Now, I'm not sure why Sky would do that, obviously, unless the club would have turned around and said to him, oh, listen, we don't want none of this negative stuff being aired, so if you hear it, can you mute it? But you definitely heard it. It was something that you heard on more than one occasion. So yeah, it's more than what's been done before, isn't it? So yeah, I think the message is getting there.
I mean, Levy himself was there with his son, and I don't know if his wife was his wife. I don't know, but with his family, let's say, because they showed him on TV.
Yeah,
and I'm sure he heard the chants.
Oh, he would have done. Yeah, he would have done.
Yeah. So, but do you think, even though we won yesterday, because I'm Levy out and ENIC out, and I'm still sticking to it, one win ain't going to change anything for me. Do you think the movement's gathering pace compared to, say, before? Because obviously we had a little, I don't know if the word's flutter or spark during, say, the Mourinho era, or when Nuno, before we even had a manager, Nuno Ferrara in summer 21, because that's the process I actually went to. There was obviously, I think, about 100 people or something that went. But do you think the movement, or I don't know what to call this, or is gathering momentum?
Yeah, I think it
previous years, or do you think?
I think it is now. I think there's more people that are now kind of going, yeah, do you know what? I've seen enough, and I think there's time for change. So I think there is more movement and more noise being created, and again, that will only ramp up when if the transfers in January are not good enough. Potentially, who knows? When you look at this next run of games that are coming up, if we get spanked by Arsenal, if we get spanked by Man City, then you still wouldn't be surprised to see Conte walk. The one thing I'm not happy with at the moment is, Conte has turned into the Riddler from Batman, isn't he? Every press conference is, well, we need a foundation, and I knew the project when I joined, and you just come out and say, what you really feel. You need to come out and say, listen, if this club want to be successful, then they need to allow me to buy the players that I need, and it isn't buying 21-year-olds who might take 3 or 4 years to develop. It's I need to buy players right now that can come in, have an impact. But I'm not sure you're probably ever going to get a manager come out while he's employed and say that, because it's not going to happen. But I don't like all these, like, you know, secret messages and in press conferences and all that kind of thing. It just drives me mad after a little while.
Really?
You know, Potter's doing it, and you know, every manager's started
Even
doing
Mourinho
it.
sort of did it, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And you know, to me, Conte for me would have been better if he realised in the summer that the club weren't going to back him the way he needed to be backed financially. Then he should have walked. You know, he should have walked, because that would have really sent a message across to everyone saying, well, listen, I came here and the club were telling me where we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We're now in the summer and they're showing me that they're not prepared to do X, Y, and Z. So I'm not hanging around. You know, I'm not gonna come and sit here and put up with what I'm being given. Then I think no one would have had any doubt left as to what the issue that the club is, you know, and that would have been better than him staying around and starting to come out with all these riddles during press conferences and just getting on with it.
Because he mentioned, where do you want to finish? 5th, 6th, 7th? And then he said, the task here is not to win the Champions League or the Premier League. He also mentioned, well, the one that really struck me a lot. Yeah, big up, Jacob. You're right, mate. In the sense that he said, what was it? The vision of the success of the club is sort of like buying young players on affordable salaries, not buying Casemiro. He used Casemiro as an example in the Sky interview, remember?
Yeah.
Saying not buying experienced players. This is a vision of the club. He didn't explicitly say this is not my vision, but he kind of implied it, because I don't know why you'd even mention it.
Well, that's right. Basically, he's saying, isn't he, that ultimately the vision of this club is to buy young players for small fees, and hopefully they get lucky and they turn into, say, Gareth Bales, and then there's big sell on at the end of the day. And if we get lucky during that process and maybe win a couple of cups, well, that's just a byproduct. But ultimately, it's not what the aim of the club is. You know, I'm like you. I'm ENIC out. The one thing it's hard to get across to some people is, just because we're ENIC out doesn't mean we don't support the team and we don't want the team to do well. You know, of course we do. Fundamentally,
I saw your
first thing
on Twitter, actually.
Yeah, that's right. For me, what people need to realise is what we've seen a club where we can clearly see right now the ambition of these owners isn't to win trophies. It is purely to make money. So as football fans, and let's face it, we all started supporting Spurs for footballing reasons. I don't support Spurs because I like business, and
one of my first games was a cup final in '99 when we won. So
yeah. So, you know, I'm not following Spurs because I like spreadsheets and I like seeing profits margins and everything. I follow Spurs because I want to see us win football matches and win trophies. And ultimately, this board have shown that that's not where they want to take the club. You know, how many opportunities have we had to build on what we would call success by finishing in the top 4, being in title races, and then all of a sudden, come the summer, we haven't invested, we haven't done what we needed to push on and done, you know, back the manager. So we've clearly seen it now. The club, and Conte is telling you, it's not what the vision of this club is. Now, you also forget, we
won in 08 as well. I was at that game. But
yeah.
He said he didn't win since
I also
99.
want to see.
Yeah.
It's not that as well we're demanding £100 million transfers, every transfer. What we want to see is quality being brought in. You know, if you look at, say, Perisic this summer, he didn't cost anything, but he was quality. So we didn't mind that signing, because it was like, you know, Conte wants him. He's proven quality and he can come into the first team and have an impact straight away. But then we go and follow it up by signing Spence, that the manager doesn't want. He's a young prospect and you're hoping we get him. If he comes good, we can sell him on. But is he going to have a decent impact on the team? No. Well, what's the point? You know, what's the point of the signing? But that's why now we want a change of ownership, because we've just seen that we've had enough time now where the club basically have shown they want to just be top 4 is the ultimate ambition. It isn't, we want to
make
win titles.
yeah.
Yeah, let's make some money, win titles. I don't even mind the things with the stadium. Some fans get really irate with things that are happening with the stadium or sponsorship deals. I don't care about none of that. That's all great. Do that. Brilliant. Bring money into the club. If there's boxing at the stadium, I don't care. It's great. If it's going to pump money in, brilliant. But please use that money wisely on the footballing side of things. So I think the biggest problem that the ENIC out movement has is there is an element of it that's a little bit aggressive, a little bit, too in people's faces who are not ENIC out, and they get a little bit, they kind of do the way that they do things, I think turns people off. And I think they have to be very careful of that, because ultimately those elements could push people away from that side of things. So I do think there is an element of that ENIC out movement that need to be careful how they go about trying to do it, because I think they can ultimately turn people away from what they want to do and what they want to achieve. So, those people, and people who know who they are, need to just kind of think about the way that they're going to try and do it and the tactics that they want to use to try and get people on the side, because some of it, what they're doing just doesn't work. And ultimately then you kind of tarnish the message and tarnish what you want to achieve.
I think also you mentioned, like, for me, it's like I've been in the account since 2012. So for me, the last straw was Saha and Nelson. When Harry got Saha and Nelson that January. I'm not saying I take it personally, but obviously Redknapp's probably one of my favourite ever managers at Tottenham.
Yeah.
Because of just the team he had, the football we played, and also because you watched a lot of players that we had under the Joel era and players that I grew up watching sort of coming of age, that's it. Like with Bale, Lennon, obviously we had Lennon for a long time before Redknapp came. Other players like even Huddleston, some other names like that. And then obviously we signed players like Van der Vaart, which is complete luck, let's be honest. And it's sort of like we were sold the thing that we'll make top four and then we'll push on.
Yeah.
And obviously Redknapp got into the Champions League in that season. And I gave the club a benefit of the doubt that summer. I said, look, okay, we've got Gallas, we've got Sandro, we've got Van der Vaart, obviously, which kind of papered over the cracks of the rest of the window.
Yeah.
But because it's their first window, I was like, I'll just give a benefit of the doubt. But then you go 2 years down the line, we're like 5 points off the top in 2012.
Yeah.
Going into January, I think 2 or 3 top players maybe could have been able to push for the actual title.
Yeah.
Because we went to the Etihad and then we lost 3-2, but it was a pretty even game from what I remember.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we went and bought Saha and Nelson. And for me, it was just a message to me that they don't. Because if I really wanted to back,
that's been what they've done all the time, isn't it?
Yeah.
And ultimately, when you look at where we are right now, again, you sit there and go, how have we gone from being a team finishing second and chasing titles in the league under, say, Poch as well, to falling away now where we're a team that basically we rely on others to mess up to potentially get into the top 4. And ultimately, we're further away from a title now than we've ever been. And that's where you sit there and go, ultimately, that isn't acceptable, because you should have been building from those positions of strength and, pushing on. And, you buy when you're strong, and we don't do that. We've never taken advantage of the strong position we've been in as a club.
I think one of the biggest amount of spending we did was actually that Redknapp half season, when that January we had to spend money to stay up. I remember.
Yeah, that's right.
At the time we splashed the cash to stay up, and it's like, well, we easily could have done that when Redknapp in 2012 or 2010 made the Champions League, or was in like top 3, top 2.
Yeah,
and finally, did what we did that January to make us stay up. So help us actually win the title, or win an FA Cup or something.
Yeah, ultimately as well, what you got to remember is there are good stuff that ENIC have done on and off the pitch. There is good stuff that, you're not, most of us that are ENIC out are not sitting here saying we slate everything they've ever done. They've done some amazing stuff, off the pitch, on the pitch. Yes, things like the stadium and the training ground. They're amazing. They're amazing, brilliant. fair play, well done. Like I say, I have no problem with the sponsorship deals, all that, the events, brilliant. I love it. Good business. But ultimately, we're a football club. And ultimately, a football club is judged by what they do on the pitch. And ENIC are just not doing what they need to do on the pitch. They don't take advantage of building from a position of strength. When you look at the money over the years that's been wasted on the likes of Nkudu, Njai, the list could go on and on of those players, and you just sit there and go, if you just brought 3 players instead of those 21 young players, we probably might have won a title or 2 and more cups and, you know, be a better side than we are now.
I think this is how I'm defending Levy here, but at the beginning when they first joined the club, from what I remember, correct me if I'm wrong here, we had a very aging side. So it was a good idea at the time to buy young players to build like a new team. Like it did make sense. Because I remember that first window we signed like 10 players or something. Some were free, some were like when we got Pedro Mendes and Sean Davis was like a midfield, I think.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And it did make sense at that time to build with younger players because you're building like a complete new team from all these aging players like Tarico left, whatever. So as a youngster, I bought into that because I thought this makes sense. But then when you get to the top 4 promised land that we were told all these years, we need to make the Champions League. Remember, we used to try. Martin Jol almost made it. He was 5th like twice.
Lasagna Gate,
Lasagna Gate, and then you had obviously ABB came in. Oh, this is after Harry, but he was tasked with making top 4 on like a shoestring budget. But especially with Harry, for me, it was because we were told all these years we'll make top 4 so we can buy better players.
Push on, make top 4.
And for 2-3 windows we didn't. It's like, well, I feel like I was lied to. And obviously, with having Mario Pochettino was just a repeat of that, which is why I was during those years I was still Levy out, despite the fact I was a minority at the time on Twitter. I'm still saying it, but and also for me, you mentioned the off-field stuff, right? With the training grounds, obviously the stadium, and these concerts and Lady Gaga and the boxing with Tyson Fury. Like people like us and me, especially, I don't have an issue with those things happening. I just think it's a good thing because at least as Spurs fans, we can go to our stadium and watch something a bit different. Like it's not a bad thing. It's more the fact that people will tolerate it more. Like I would be complaining about those sorts of things more if we were actually spending that money, like you said, on the team. It's just like, where does the money go? It's going on more infrastructure or more training grounds. It's not going to the team. And do you remember Levy did that video saying that every piece of money we make or something goes back into the team, which is a load of rubbish. And then he also put out that statement after Mourinho got sacked saying, we're going to do the vision of Tottenham and play the Tottenham way again, blah, blah, blah. And again, obviously, we've got Nuno, which I don't know what way he was playing, but
I think it just shows that there's a fundamental. It's a bit like, I've said before as well. If you're going to bring a manager like Conte in, then you need to realise this is a manager that works by signing ready-made players. He's not a project manager. He's not someone that comes in and works with youngsters and wants to improve and works on a shoestring budget. He wants to come in, buy quality players that can come in straight into the first team and win you trophies over a short period of time. So if that wasn't what your vision was going to be, then you shouldn't have appointed the bloke as the manager. They would have been better off going out and getting someone like Potter, or even gone and brought Poch back into the fold and said, right, you want to work with some younger players and that? Well, here you go. But don't bring a manager in that works a certain way and he works a certain way, and then don't back him that way. But as well with the ENIC, I saw today, people sit there and go, oh, people need to remember where the club was when ENIC took over. Listen, I get that, but if you had broadband right now and it went down and you phoned up your broadband provider and they turned around and said to you, yeah, well, look, be fair though. Yes, we're charging you an expensive fee, but come on, it's not as bad as it was 20 years ago, is it? So, you should just accept and be happy with it. People wouldn't accept that. You go, no, listen, I'm paying top money for supposedly a top service. So I want the top service. So you can't keep looking back on that. where were Spurs in the 90s or what were Spurs doing when ENIC took over. We've moved well away from that now, and we're a completely different club. And ultimately, we've got expectations from what we've been told will happen.
Yeah, exactly.
What's actually happening.
Yeah.
So
We've been told this.
You know, you've been told that Champions League would push the club to a next level, right? Well, it hasn't. The training ground and stadium will take the club to the next level. Well, given what we're seeing on the football pitch, that training ground must be fucking dreadful. Because I tell you now, you're not seeing players come out of there that are wonder players. We're not seeing youth coming through the ranks that you're going, wow, you can see what that training ground is achieving. So ultimately, we're not, you know, you're not seeing what you've been told will happen. And as fans, you can only sit so long with that before you go, well, actually, time for change, I think.
mean, maybe people will say, oh, you're impatient, because obviously I was Levy out from 2012 under Redknapp when he got sacked as well. That pissed me off a lot. Because as far as I was concerned, he finished fourth. So why are you sacking a manager that you told his remit was finishing fourth? But anyway, But it's just because obviously I felt I was lied to, and obviously there were fans for years telling me, when we build the new stadium, we're going to spend more money. Like, we're hearing like 3 years later, and nothing's changed.
The other word, the other word that's a really bugbear word of mine is this: you're entitled.
Yeah, it's like
yeah, you're right. I'm entitled because I've been told things will happen. I've been told when a stadium comes along, it will change things. And what did we leave White Hart Lane for and build this new stadium if that's not what's going to happen? And also, when you're charging people the sort of money that Spurs are charging people, they become entitled. So, you know, yes,
if we're going to be rubbish, cut the ticket prices in half. People get less people complaining.
You know, and also what I think people need to realise is if you saw some proactiveness, you'd be happy. Like when we signed Ndombele, no one was miserable.
Oh yeah,
because we thought we'd seen Levy doing what we'd asked him to do, which is go out, don't piss about taking months to get a transfer over the line. It was signed, done, and we thought we'd brought this, you know, one of Europe's best midfielders, and we paid a decent amount of money for him and got that deal over the line very quickly. And everyone, you couldn't not but praise the club and go, well, that's the sort of thing we want to see because you've been proactive. It's taken, you haven't messed about for a whole transfer window doing it. Brilliant. This is the sort of thing we want to see. And if we see more of this, we're well on board. It just doesn't happen though.
Milk cup sponsored by Milky Pocket.
Yeah, milk cup. Yeah,
I remember that. But it's obviously it's just for me. It's just the lies, and it's just like, okay, you can see it in the consumer's aspect, like you said, where we're paying a lot more than when we were White Hart Lane. We're getting probably worse football, in some sense.
Yeah, the club's gone backwards since then.
It don't make any sense.
On the pitch, the club has gone backwards.
So it's just that we get fed all these statements and all these things. Oh, I'm this, I'm that. But I think also I have a theory about Spurs managers and transfer windows, and also about Spurs managers in general. So to entice Conte, obviously we do pay him like a big wage, right? We pay some of the managers the highest amount of money. But also I think they kind of see the training ground and the stadium, and London. Obviously, London's obviously an attractive thing. I mean, and Mourinho and Conte are two managers who managed in London before. Now, it's sort of the sense that they come and they see the stadium, they get sold like a dream, saying, "Oh, we'll back you, we'll support your." Maybe they even use the word project. Maybe we'll support your project. And then I think with Levy, in a sense of this transfer window that just passed, the way I saw it was that he promised Conte, "Oh, we'll bring in these players like Perisic, for example." So at the start of the window, we were looking good, and obviously I was positive. I was like, "This is going to be a good window with sort of 3 good players." And like with Pochettino, when we got Ndombele and Lo Celso, or not Lo Celso, but Ndombele initially, let's say, and then at some point in the window, it goes all quiet. And then Levy just goes and does the signing, and the manager's like, "What's going on? Like, what's that?" It's almost like, so they gave him enough, like a minimum enough.
Yeah.
Say, "Oh, you'll be happy with this," but then they go and do something completely different the rest of the window.
Yeah, I mean, this summer started with a bang, you know, and like I say again, you couldn't moan. Perisic, good signing. Foster as a backup, good signing. And then we got Basuma for 25 million that we all went, wow. Well, that's a, 25
Bargain,
million for
yeah.
Basuma, amazing signing. But it's almost like the club then got cold feet and sort of went, oh, hang on a minute.
Too much.
We've just done a load of business here. This ain't us. Well, step back, slow down. Oh, let's go and get that Jed Spence geezer. The manager don't want him, but he's young, could have a future. And again, like as you say, but again, I would like to see a manager that the minute they know, right, this club are not doing what I need them to do. We all thought Jose would be the one that wouldn't put up with any rubbish.
Yeah.
And we all think Conte is going to be the one that, the Conte won't put up with anything. He'll walk the minute he sees he's not getting what he wants. And yet Jose stuck around and started, like I say, speaking riddles in press conferences. And now we're seeing the exact same thing with Conte.
But this is why I believe I think the managers do want to succeed, like they do. So part of them probably does want to do well. So that's probably why they don't want to explicitly say, oh, this and this. But at the same time, I think the only manager I think of in the world right now who'd literally walk, and I think he did, was Bielsa. Was it Bielsa who walked away from the club after like 2 weeks or something, wasn't it? Something like Can you imagine him kicking off with Levy? It would just be...
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah, we were all hoping we had these two managers that potentially would walk the minute they saw things weren't happening, and it doesn't seem to have panned out.
Unfortunately, I think the contract kind of goes against him and us because, yes, 6 months left? Why would you walk now? You get your payday over the next 6 months.
But then that's like
he's on gardening leave without being on gardening leave. If that makes sense, I don't know.
But does Conte need a payday?
Not really.
With the money he's probably already earned in his career, does he really need a payday? It's the one thing that I always aim at Poch. The one criticism I have of Poch when he was there was when he was in the really strong position where the fans loved him and the team was there.
After Leicester season, I would say.
Yeah, if he saw he wasn't going to be backed and had to suddenly not be allowed to go and buy anyone at all in a transfer window,
not really.
The bloke should have walked. Because if Poch had walked at after that summer window, when he was a god, he was the best manager in the world, a god to the fans. If he'd walked at that point and said, listen, they don't want to back me and this club ain't going to go where it needs to go right now, I've done all I can, fans would have gone ballistic.
Yeah, I think Twitter would have gone absolutely crazy.
Supporters would have gone ballistic and it would have been Levy out. The ground would have been as toxic as you've ever seen it before.
In the old White Hart Lane as well.
But these managers just seem to put up with it and, like I say, come out in press conferences and talk in riddles to try and get a secret message across. And it's just like
Morse code. It's like Morse code.
Yeah, it's like a hostage, isn't it? Where he's like, no, I'm fine, honest, I'm fine. They're treating me really well. And you just go, you're not. They're abusing the bloke.
Not really. Not really. No.
Yeah, but walk.
But I know you say money is not a big thing to these managers, but I do think they like it. I really do think so. But with Poch, unfortunately, we need to talk about him quickly before I end this. He's the worst person to come in after Conte because, unfortunately, I think Poch is very comfortable coming back to Tottenham. I think he sees a comfortable job because he just experienced what he experienced at PSG.
Yeah,
a much bigger club with much higher expectations.
Yeah,
trying to manage egos. We got him that job, obviously, because he did well at Spurs. That's why PSG took him. And obviously, he'll be working with young players. It fits the ENIC model.
Yeah.
Give him young players. He'll use them. He's still using Kudu when we got Kudu.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It was still like a squad player for him. He might have not played the most, but he still used him. He used him and played them in Champions League against Monaco, I think.
Yeah.
So he used him in a big game. Even though he was obviously a player he didn't want, he made use of Sissoko. He made him into some sort of player.
Well, he made Sissoko for 1 year an undroppable first name on the team sheet player at one point.
So, he will use these sorts of players. So he's sort of the perfect manager for ENIC, not for the good of Tottenham, but for the good of ENIC. That's how I see it.
I think Poch has kind of had his fingers burnt at a bigger club. I think
he's calling back.
Maybe because people have said, why would Poch come back to Spurs? Well, because he'd be turning up somewhere that he's loved and idolised, and he knows it's a safe environment for
Yeah,
him.
that's what I'm saying.
So
It's
yeah,
just
he would jump at the chance because he's gone to a bigger club and seen, oh, actually, yeah, I might win something, but it's horrible. You know, the fans turn against you instantly. The players you have to deal with, you know, are a pain in the
toxic.
arse.
Yeah.
So yeah, get me back to Spurs, get me back to them days and those supporters, and I'll bite your hand off for it. I mean, if Conte was to walk, I think as well, Poch is ENIC's last chance at giving
I'm
themselves a couple
I'm
more
not.
seasons.
Oh, no.
We
For
wouldn't
some,
be. We wouldn't be. But if Conte walked tomorrow and Poch was appointed as manager, there'd be enough of the fan base that'd be, oh yeah, Poch is home. Oh yeah, right now we need to let him build his team again and give him a couple of seasons. And it would buy Enid that little bit more because those people,
attacking football.
yeah, those
Yeah.
people love Poch and have got that fondness for him. The likes of me and you would go, no, still not having it. But I think there's enough of the fan base that would still accept that appointment and be prepared to give it a couple of seasons.
I'm saying this right now. If anyone watching this or watching this back, if Poch gets appointed, I'm going to post like a 10-minute rant because I'm not going to be happy at all.
10 minutes. That's a small rant, mate.
But because honestly, I'd actually be fuming. Like I'd actually be more angry than if he brought someone in like Tuchel, because for me it would just basically say Poch is going to come in, sit down, get top 4 every year, or try and get top 4 every year on like a minimum budget with young players. It'll be like a revolving door. He won't really stick. I don't see him saying anything to leave if he doesn't get back. Personally, I don't think it will happen. He won't demand big players because he's been burnt, like you said, at PSG. So it's just not going to happen, I don't think.
Yeah, that's right. The only trouble is, though, you sit there, don't you, and go, but who else is coming in that's going to do any better when the board have clearly got their vision?
It's just like we'll just be sort of existing, not actually like living. That's how I see it. The total will be existing, like we'll be there, but we won't be moving forward as a club. It will just be there.
I mean, if Conte goes and you bring someone like Tuchel in, he
I
might
don't think he'll survive 1 year. Actually,
he might have that 6-month bounce, but ultimately, when he doesn't get what he needs in another transfer window or two, the same thing is going to happen, isn't it? So, yeah, I think you could bring Houdini in right now, and he's still a struggle.
But I just don't think people realize that, and it's because the reason I see the Poch thing is a very, very dangerous thing is because I've even seen people on Twitter saying, "Oh, Emerson would be good on the Poch. We'd play back 4," and I'm just like, "Oh my god, please!" Someone's like, "Emerson will stay now when Poch comes." I'm just like,
"No." I say you see some weird things on Twitter, and there are some fans that you sort of question what they actually support Tottenham for. It's like, what is it you're supporting this club for? Because you're putting up with this rubbish and happy about it. So
the weird thing about it is I see Tottenham as like a toxic relationship. So you're in a relationship with a girl, she keeps cheating on you, but for some reason you won't leave.
Oh,
you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice.
The amount of times when the game's ended, I've said, "That's it. I'm not watching them anymore.
I'm done. Yeah,
I'm done. The next game, but then the next day you're back on. All right, 8 o'clock kickoff. Right?
Yeah,
yeah, you're there."
I was on another stream actually with some American fans, and I go to them. I wasn't the host. I was like, "Oh, so you guys gonna watch the first half because it's quite early or something?" And they're like, because they slated us saying we're second half team, blah blah. And I think Kuba was on that as well. And I was like, "Are you guys gonna watch it?" Because I was going to the game against Villa. They're watching it from home. I was like, "You can easily just skip it." And they're like, obviously, they spent the whole stream slating the first half performances, and they're like, "Oh no, we're gonna end up watching the whole game." it's like you, because like you said, and you phrased it the best actually on your podcast that day, was like because you have like emotional investment or emotional attachment to the club.
They've got you, yeah. It's in your blood.
Even if we raise ticket prices by like £10 tomorrow, it's not going to be like no. It's like
if Spurs became a non-league team tomorrow playing on Hackney Marshes, we'd all still turn up because
I'll turn up.
It's our club. So yeah, and that's what ENIC know. ENIC knows.
It's like emotional blackmail. I don't know if
people won't ever walk away because you can't. It's more to you than it is to us. Yeah. It's life.
Unfortunately, with football, it's like that. Once you choose your team, or in my case, in your case, we maybe brought up supporting Spurs. You can't lose it. It's just
Yeah,
not.
that's it.
It's
Yeah,
like
that's
to
it.
Michael, because you read these people saying, "How dare you say Levy out? How dare you say ENIC out? The go support another club." But I'm like, I can't. Like, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I'm stuck.
like, I can't leave the relationship.
I've had many a conversations with my dad saying, thank you very much for this relationship you've
But
put
it's
me
funny when you see fans like who started supporting the club, say like 5 years ago or like 2 years ago. I'm not against those fans. I'm not saying they're bad fans or anything. And they choose Spurs, and I'm like, what made you choose Tottenham?
Yeah,
I
of
didn't
all
have a
the
choice.
teams.
I didn't have a choice.
My nephew lives in Wales and he's become a Spurs supporter, and I'm like, you could have chose Man City from there, Liverpool. All you want to join in the sickening behaviour, do you? Well, no problem.
It's like, because everyone I've asked me, it's not normal supporting Tottenham. It's really not.
But imagine that as well. When you support Tottenham in England, you get double whammy.
Oh god.
On that
With England, I
front,
kind of expect it though, and because I'm Greek, I guess I don't have as much of like an attachment to them.
yeah.
But like with Spurs, it's like it really hurts. Like like when we lose, I'm like moping around for like 2-3 days. I just
The only
like
good
a
thing,
mood.
mate, when you've been a Spurs supporter as long as we have, it helps build up your resilience.
Yeah,
There's not
that's
much,
a good
there's
thing.
not much that can knock you down and cause you a problem in life because you've been through it. You've
It's like
experienced those
I find my
emotions.
issues with Tottenham are worse than anything else. Honestly, like it's like
Yeah.
I can stomach Tottenham. It's fine. I've been through that. So
I can
throw
deal with.
whatever you want at me.
Yeah, I can deal with this.
All right. So before we end it, Carl, where can we find you? Is Coys.com coming back by any chance at all?
We might do, mate. Yeah, we might. I think there's a little bit more desire to maybe look about getting something back up and running again. So we might start pumping the odd one or two out here and there, and if we do, we'll give you a shout, mate, and get you on. But the Twitter handle's there, so always spouting nonsense on there most days. So yeah, give us a follow and trying to jump on as many streams as possible, really.
Yeah, and just before we go, just a match prediction for Saturday. Can you give me a score or
3-0.
3-0? Okay. I'm
3-0.
saying 2. I'm saying 2-1 because we never
And
miss.
Kane to beat Greaves' record.
Yeah, I actually think Son will score on Saturday.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm saying 2-1 Tottenham. Yeah. Right, and just before we leave, come on, you Spurs. Come on, you Spurs.